Welcome to another video. Yes, the engine bay is empty. No, I have not changed the plan so far. If you watched the last videos, you know that we blew the head gasket on the engine and it was getting blow by, so it came out. The old engine is still going back in. That is sitting right over there getting prepped to go back in. But I figured now is probably a good time to also just kind of go over the details of removing an engine and putting the engine back in case you guys have never done it. It's fairly simple. It just took me taking it easy, a couple hours to get the other engine out. It'll take a little bit longer to get the other one in just because you're tightening everything up and trying to get the line up with the transmission and all that stuff. But basically, to remove the engine, you go underneath, you got the exhaust on each side, so 2 bolts on each side to remove there. You got the transmission, so I was able to get the top 4 bolts from the top of the engine, and then there was a couple, 3 or 4 that I got from the bottom. You take the starter off, and then the engine mounts. And that's pretty much everything underneath the car. You can then put the car back on the ground, drain fluids, so drain the coolant. You don't have to drain the oil, but drain the oil if you want to. Power steering lines, so the line right here going down to the rack, and then another line that goes to the cooler on the front. Drain those, and then that's all the fluid out of the engine. For up on the top, you got the intake to come off. That's pretty simple. On this side also, you got the fuel line, so you need a special tool in order to remove the fuel lines. You can rent that from any of the auto parts store. It would be useful to buy one if you plan on removing and installing engines quite a bit. So that's something good to have. Also on this side is the engine electrical disconnect, which is nice. You can just disconnect that electrical on that side and the whole engine harness comes out on the engine. So that makes it really convenient. You don't have to try to get the harness pulled out from underneath the intake and routed underneath the engine and things like that. You can just disconnect it there, pull the whole thing out, and then in my case, I'm swapping it over from the new engine back to the old engine. Also, on this side, you got the electrical for the alternator and then to the starter. So disconnect that from the fuse box. You got a few vacuum lines and then the throttle cable. Those are all pretty simple to remove. I removed the radiator. It's probably a good idea just so you don't accidentally damage it, and it gives you plenty of room to slide the engine forward to get it out of the transmission. So radiator and all those hoses came off. And I think that pretty much covers a few other, like a ground strap. But yeah, that pretty much then covers everything that you have to disconnect, and then the engine is free and you just pull it out, pull it forward to get it out of the transmission and yank her out. We'll slap the new one in, reverse process. It will be a little fun getting it to line up with the transmission. It always is. You can pull the engine with the transmission. It's just more of a hassle. A lot of times then you need to drain the transmission just because it will pour out of the tail shaft. Done that. So I like to just leave the transmission in. It makes it kind of a pain to mount up, but it's not that bad. We'll put a jack probably underneath of it to get it pushed up and then get it all kind of lined up. Also, I pulled the hood. It might not be necessary depending on your setup. For me, it just made it easier to pull the hood off to get the engine hoist to go high enough to get the engine out over top of this upper cross member here. Might be able to do it without actually removing the hood, but that just makes it much easier that it's not in the way. So let's go take a look over here and we'll check out the old new engine that's going back in. All right, so here's the new engine that was pulled out. Electrical has been pulled off of it, the clutch has been pulled off of it and installed onto this engine. I still have the starter lines to pull off and to install on this one. All right, I'm sure some of you guys are also wondering why leave this engine kind of how it is when I have much better parts on that one that I could easily take off, swap onto this one, such as the intake. I could even go all the way down to take those heads off and put them onto this engine. This engine, although is solid and everything, it also was having a little bit of smoking issue, so I don't want to put any more strain on the bottom end than what I need to. Also, this is the quickest way to get the car back up and running, is to just put this one back in untouched. I would have to go and buy all the gaskets in order to do any swap over to this one. But really, it's just to get the car back up and running as reliably as possible. I know that the tune that I had on this engine worked, as you know, it was on there for 10 years. So I don't really want to make any changes to this engine combination. I know that it works, so that's why I am just leaving the engine as is and going to just slap it into the car and not actually try to take any parts from that. But we will build that engine back up with those parts or better ones, so don't worry. So this one will go back in to keep us running for this autocross season. We need to just be able to go out there and get the points that we need to complete the season and hopefully come away with a trophy. This engine got me a trophy last year, so it's more than capable to get me another one this year, I think. And it was really close to winning ladies entries again, really close in that second place, battling for first in ladies. So we just need to keep going to events to keep getting those points, and this engine will be more than capable of doing that for us. Other than that, I don't think there's really anything else to go over on this engine. So I will get this one put back in, get everything plumbed up, and get her running here pretty shortly. All right, in order to run the other engine, I need to reprogram the ECU. For what I have on this ECU, I use the Modes F3 chip. So it just goes on to the J or J3 port on the ECU, and it will run the tune that's on this. So to program this, you need to use the Jaybird, which is also from Modes. So you're able to plug all this up. And then for the ECU program that I'm using is just Tuner Pro RT. So it's a free software that you can just download from the internet and use, which is really nice. A lot of this information is all on EFI Dyno Tuning is where I got it from. So we'll go in here. So it beeped, so I know it's it found the hardware, but we'll connect it. It found the Motes chip there at the bottom. Go to Hardware Utilities, Motes Prom. So for this chip, we'll need to make sure first that it found the J3 port adapter there. We need to erase the chip. In order to put the new tune on it, we need to erase it. So we'll do that. And then we'll load file to buffer, and we'll find the tune that I want to put onto it. And then just hit program chip, and it goes through and it will program the chip. Then we can disconnect it from the computer, put it back into the car, and we are all good to go. So the tune that I was running on this other engine is one that I actually had kind of modified a little bit back in 2013 was the date. So I know that it's going to run great. It has been doing it since 2013. But that's basically, I think, when I went in and put in the GD40 heads, ECAM, and things like that. So the tune that I'm using is a modified J4, J1 tune, which is for like a 94, 95 Cobra. So it had basically the same heads, intake, and injectors, and all that stuff that are on my engine. So the tune is the ideal one to use instead of using like the normal GT tune, which is the T4 MO. I have changed a few things in it to be more suited to this engine, since things are removed from the engine that aren't needed anymore. But all the fueling, timing, all that is completely unchanged. So I'm still using the Ford stock stuff that was done up for the Cobra, and it runs really good. Speaking of tunes, I did look through the tune a little bit for the other engine, which was a tune that I was given. I didn't actually make or do any changes to it, and it was running more timing than what like a stock Cobra or stock GT tune are doing. So maybe that kind of leads into why that engine blew a head gasket. It was commanding more timing than what maybe my fuel allowed or something like that. So I'm not an expert on tuning by any means. I haven't done any tuning. I've just done a few tweaks here and there in the tune of things that I know. I've not done any fuel changes, timing changes, so that I'm not experienced with. Once we get the other engine figured out, it will get a tune from a dyno shop. That's the best course to go forward, not relying on anybody else's tune. All right, so let me get this chip back in the ECU, and then we'll be able to start the car up, hopefully. All right, we are ready for the first startup. So engine is all in, everything is buttoned up. I've primed the fuel, I've checked for leaks, I've checked for leaks down below from any oil, coolant, or anything like that. Everything is good. So let's hope that she starts up and runs great. I will need to redo the timing. I have had the distributor out on this engine, so it's in there, kind of adjusted, maybe, hopefully, so might need to tweak that. It might not really want to start up and idle right away, but try to get it started, get it kind of heated, warmed up some to where we can set the base idle. That is actually not too bad. Smoke it a little bit. Not sure if that's just stuff coming off of the exhaust. All right, it's running actually pretty good without going in and messing with the timer or anything. So I am still going to check it, so we'll do that in a moment. Check the engine oil, make sure it's all good. We got plenty of coolant still. I'm going to let that still go to see if it works out any air bubbles. Yeah, so that was pretty easy, pretty success. So there was a little bit of smoking, as you saw at the beginning. I think that was things just burning off of the headers. I did degrease and wash down the engine before putting it in, so I think it was just some of that stuff kind of burning off. It all started to go away. So, and I reached around, didn't feel any exhaust leaks or anything like that. So I think it's just things burning off of the headers. The engine is smoking a little bit more than I quite remembered. So probably on borrowed time on this engine as well. Maybe I'll get some of the Lucas oil to kind of put in there to maybe help seal up the rings a little bit thicker oil. I did put like 10W30 in it to kind of help, you know, some oil burning issues that it might have. But well, as long as it gets me through this season, we will be good. So I'm gonna go take her for a quick test drive, make sure everything still feels good, and that wraps it up for getting this old engine back into this car to continue on with this autocross season. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one. All right, quick update after taking the car for a test drive. I found that a couple of these wires on the distributor were not actually clicked all the way down. So that fixed the smoking out of the exhaust at idle, I believe. And then when I was driving, I was still having a miss. So I found a couple wires that were not fully seated in connectors inside the car. So hopefully that fixes the issue with cylinder 8 that was not firing. So that most likely was the fuel injector was not actually shooting any fuel into there. So there was no combustion. That's why the spark plug was perfectly clean. But I also found a couple other cylinders that were they were still making contact, but were a little loose in the connections. So hopefully that gets that all solved and the car is at full power now. Did any of those issues cause problems on the other engine? I don't think so. The wires that I found that were a little loose were on cylinders that did not blow, because you can't really blow out the head gasket if the cylinder isn't having actual combustion. But maybe it contributed to it in another fashion. All right, there it is. Car is good to go. We'll see you in the next one.